So we're learning about how to annul vows. We're learning how to annul vows. And we're learning that you go to a sage to annul a vow, and essentially he gets you into a situation where you say, oh, if I'd known this, I wouldn't have made the vow. That's essentially the mechanics of annulling the vow. If I'd known this, I wouldn't have made the vow. And now we're going to jump into the fifth Mishnah of the ninth chapter. We're going to look at an example where some guy is going to suffer an enormous financial loss because of his vow. And he's going to do it because of the ketubah. Now, just to understand this situation, let's just remind ourselves about a Mishnah which we learned in Ketubot. Hamadirat ishto, someone who makes a vow relating to his wife. So we're back into vows, and we know, okay, that the rabbis don't like vows. Someone who vows relating his wife. Mita shmish hamita. He vowed not to have sexual intercourse with her. And the Mishnah rules, Beit Shammai omrim shtei Shabbatot. Beit Shammai say 2 weeks. Uveit Hillel omrim Shabbat achat. Beit Hillel say 1 week. And what are they talking about? They're meaning that within 2 weeks, if you follow Beit Shammai, or 1 week if you follow Beit Hillel, within that period of time, he has to divorce her and give her her ketubah. He's not entitled. He's just not entitled to make this condition. She can refuse, but he can't. So with that in mind, let's jump into our Mishnah in Nedarim, and we'll see someone has made exactly this vow. They can open. Opening up is the word in the Mishnah for releasing a vow. They can open up via his wife's ketubah. How does that work? Ma'aseh. It just happened one day. It happened that a man vowed not to benefit from his wife. Now, sexual relationships are included here because it's assumed, the Mishnah assumes that he benefits as well as her. So if he vows not to benefit from his wife, he's vowed implicitly not to have sex with her. So he has to divorce her. Well, the halakha actually goes according to Beit Hillel. So he's got to divorce her within 1 week and pay her her full ketubah. Well, let's just see what's going to happen next. Her ketubah was 400 zuz, so that's twice the normal amount for a virgin. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Uvat lifnei Rabbi Akiva, so he came before Rabbi Akiva. Vechivo liten la ketubata. He went before Rabbi Akiva, or perhaps she went before Rabbi Akiva. Anyway, Rabbi Akiva forced him to pay out her ketubah. Amarlo, he said to him, Rebbe, my rabbi, shmonema or dinar hiniach abba. My father left me 800 dinari, 800 dinars. And my brother took 400. And I took 400. Lord Dayash, he told him our time, time. Can't we just split the 400? Isn't it enough that she should get 200 and I should get 200? And Rabbi Akiva replies, Amar lo Rabbi Akiva. And this is a really fundamental principle in terms of ketubot. And we read this, by the way, we still read it in the ketubah today. That the ketubah today is what in bankers' language we call a senior charge. It's a top level charge over the husband's assets. And in the words of the ketubah, he has to pay that even if he has to sell the shirt from his back. That's the language of today's ketubah. So let's see what Rabbi Akiva says. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, afilu at mocher sa'ar roshach. Even if you have to sell the hair of your head, at noten la ketubota. You pay her ketubah. You have to pay her the 400 zuz. So what does he say? Amar. Ilu hayiti yodeh sheken lo hayiti nodeh. If I'd known that, I wouldn't have made the oath. That's exactly the situation we want to get him into. V'hitiro Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva released him from his vow. He made it clear he didn't want this vow, and so Rabbi Akiva released him. Now, it turns out, now the Mishnah is now going to segue from here into partial release. And we're still with Rabbi Akiva, by the way. So again, we're seeing that the Mishnah moves from subject to subject, but always with a link. And the link here seems to be Rabbi Akiva. So as we open the 9th Mishnah, Potchin Bayamim Tovim Uva Shabbatot. They open, as we open the 9th Mishnah, they open the vow, they release the vow via festivals and Shabbatot. How are we going to do that? Well, let's see. Barishona hayu omrim otan hayamim mutzarin ushar kol hayamim asurin. In the beginning, they used to say that for these days the vow is cancelled, but for others it is binding. Now, at this point, we should be asking ourselves, what is going on here? How can it possibly, what are these days and those days? And how can the vow be cancelled on some days? This is an incomprehensible Mishnah. This is, by the way, is why you need the commentators. So let's have a look at the Rambam. And the Rambam is going to explain this oath. Kagon, shenishpa shelo nishte yain or shelo yochal basar kach v'kach yamim. For example, he swore he wouldn't drink wine or eat meat for some number of days. And to this, this is the sage that he goes to release the vow, says, look, if you'd known at the time that you were obliged on Shabbatot or on festivals included in those days, so you swore a vow, must be more than a week, and maybe even over a Yom Tov. If you know that you were obliged to eat meat and drink wine, because of the verse, we know it's a famous verse in Isaiah, V'karat la Shabbat oneg, you shall call the Shabbat a delight. And the Mishnah seems to assume that delight here means meat and wine. So if you'd known that you had the obligation to eat meat and wine, would you have made the oath? And vehu omer lo, and he says, no, I wouldn't have made the oath. And then matirin lo shvuato. They released the vow for him, and the Rambam concludes the halacha ka Rabbi Akiva, and the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. So we're talking about someone who swore not to drink wine or eat meat for a certain period. Let's come back to our Mishnah. Now we understand what is going on. So potchin b'yamim tovim uva Shabbatot. So they release him because of the holidays and the Shabbatot. They say, oh yeah, don't you realize that this vow about not eating meat and not drinking wine, you can't keep it on holidays and Shabbatot. In the beginning, they just used to release it for those days. They used to basically release him from his vow on Shabbat and Yom Tov, but he'd have to stick to his vow the rest of the time. Ad Sheba Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came. Velimed, and he taught. Shehaneder shehutar miktsato hutar kulo. A vow which is partially released is entirely released. If you somehow get released from a part of your vow, then you are actually released from the whole vow. And we'll see some more examples now. Let's see some more examples. So the Mishnah asks, Ketzad, how does it work? So he said, Kunam shani ne'eneh lechulchem. Kunam, that I benefit from any of you. Hutar echad mehem, hutar kulam. So if he got a release from one of them, maybe one of them was his wife. We've already seen he can get released from his wife because of the keturah. If one of them was released, they are all released. In other words, you're released from a part of a vow, you get the whole thing. What if he says, she'eni ne'eneh lezeh, lezeh, velazeh, that I swear that lest I benefit from this one or this one or this one. So he actually names off these people. So now we're going to have a hierarchy. So the Mishnah says, Mutara Rishon hu tru kulam. If the first one was released, all are released. It seems as though we're going to operate in a chain here. So if the first one was released, everyone mentioned after him is going to be released. Hutar acharon, ha'acharon mutar v'kulam asurim. If the last one was released, then okay, that last is released, but the rest are still forbidden. In other words, it works forward but not backwards. Releasing the last one doesn't help. Releasing the first one releases everyone after him. Releasing the last in the list doesn't help. What about in the middle? Hutar ha'emsa'i. If the middle one was released, Heimenu ulamata mutar, those below him are released. Heimenu ulamala asur, those above him are forbidden. We're talking about below and above in the list. So say there's Fred, Joe, and Bloggs and Smith. If Bloggs is released, then Smith, who was named after, is also released. But Joe, who was named before, is not. So it depends on where you are on the list. What if he swears a separate oath for each one? Or maybe he's going to say, She'enin hine lazeh, lazeh korban velazeh korban. In other words, he's sworn a specific oath on each one. And he's used the word korban. At that point, these are separate oaths. Tzrichin pesach l'chol echad ve'echad. At this point, he needs to release each one of them. And of course, we've seen this before, by the way. Do we remember the example of someone who saw a group of people eating his figs, and and he swears that they shouldn't, he swears a penalty on all of them. And he discovers that two of them are actually his brother and his father. And bade Hillel say, oh yeah, all of them are let off. A small amount of an oath doesn't hold, the rest of it doesn't hold either. And that is the basic principle which the Mishnah is going to deal with.